G'day, this is Paul from Tiger Hill Permaculture in Tasmania. We're going to today have a look around the kitchen garden and just discuss some of the design strategies that we're using in the garden to cover wind, water, maintenance and companion planting. At the moment we've got one of the best seasons going with the garden full of food, prolific growth, and with the help of volunteers we couldn't have got to this stage with implementation across the whole site. One of the site elements that I'm needing to design out of the system, I guess you can call it, is the wind. We have this expansive gully running through the northeastern side of the in the summer. The winds come from the southeast. In the winter they come from the northwest, and they howl through here and can decimate the garden quite extensively. So over the last several years been creating this earthen embankment which will help deflect wind up and over the garden. And I plan to plant this out with bamboo and several different tree species to, one, slow and stop the wind as much as possible. The winds do get quite horrific, but at the same time, while I'm managing the wind, I also have to think about the shading effect on the nursery and the heat and cold. The first stage of the wind from the northwest being managed by this earthen embankment. Then as we go down into the garden, we have alternative strategies in recycled shipping pallets that we're setting up around the garden strategically, either at the end of the beds, around trees, at the back of compost or garden beds, in a smaller scale technique to dull the force of the wind. As it comes up over this embankment, it's potentially curling and creating a flow-on effect down through the garden. So as we're looking down here at the end of each bed, we have homemade pallet timbers on star pickets at the end of each bed, which is then also shading the end of the bed all the way down each end. There's those. We have planter boxes with tall backs on the back of them to help slow the wind down again. We've created larger planter boxes with pallet timbers on the back of those to slow the wind. We've created a passion fruit trellis with pallet timbers on that to slow the wind down. Coming from the southeast, back down at the start of the garden, again we've got a wall of shipping pallets there on star pickets, and then we're strategically planting corn and different other crops to help protect more sensitive crops as well. So then one of the last strategies that we're going to be considering is this ridge down towards the southeast. Is planting some poplars. We've just been out today surveying some tree planting zones. So the intention is to create a staggered wall effect of poplars on this first ridge and then the ridge in the back. So the first tree zone will take the brunt of the wind and slow the wind down to the second, and then by the time hopefully it gets to the house, that the wind is reduced in its force, that the garden, fruit trees and things like that are getting a good start during the spring without knocking flowers off for fruit setting. Okay, so we're in the top part of the kitchen garden at the moment. Up to the northwest here, we're on the inside of the earthen embankment that's becoming the windbreak. The stone wall that's in construction there is the thermal mass for the polytunnel in the future. So in the future that's going to be, the mound is going to be planted out, but as a micro micro system in managing wind at the moment. We have the pallet timbers on the back of garden beds. So as we're walking, or the wind is working through the garden, it then gets slowed down at those pallet timbers, and then pallet timbers at the end of each bed, and they become the climbing zone for climbing plants as well. So as we're going through here, each bed end has a pallet timber. You can see the corn at the moment is being blown this way, but the pallet timbers are having some effect in actually slowing the wind down as well. And as we come through the garden, the tomatoes are being protected by the corn with this northwesterly wind. So we're hoping to get a good fruit set without the flowers being knocked off of these. And in here we've got a mixture of tomatoes and basil, cucumber. At the base it's been seeded for lettuce and onion, tomatoes, lettuce, onion, and carrots. They all like to grow together. They're all friends. So we come to the end of what we call B block of garden beds, and then we have planter boxes with windbreak panels on the back of those as well, which again become a climbing zone, a shading zone, a windbreak zone. So that's replicated all the way through the middle of the garden. And then as we come to the back of the garden again, we'll stay up the top here. We've got our grey water system and a worm farm that's also acting as a windbreak on the top part of the garden here, as well as a new planter box, pallet timbers, just bolted to the back of the planter box frame. So that's we've got a gap in the ramp up here where the earthen embankment finishes. So the wind is coming through there. It's being slowed down here. It's being slowed down again with the pallets at the end of the garden bed. And as we come down to this new zone, the new zone of the orchard in the garden, we've created a passion fruit climbing trellis with pallet timbers on there, and the idea is to create a wall of passion fruit which will slow the wind coming down through here as well. Up on the embankment from the workshop, we have a very close planted row of mulberry trees. I'll let those grow to about 2.5 meters and then create a hedge out of those. And then further back, several hundred meters back to the property boundary, plant some other bamboos or poplars to slow the wind coming. As soon as it enters the property, it gets slowed down here. It gets slowed down with large obstacles in the storage area, like the chicken caravan. It then comes to the windbreak on the passion fruit trellis and or the plant material and life that's growing up the trellis. And again, it'll create a microclimate for a lot of these other companions. So the companions in here are lettuce and carrots and tomatoes, replicated all the way through. We have sunflowers in there as well, different types of herbs. And one other interesting thing that we're managing here is water conservation and low maintenance. So the garden is fully drip irrigated with Netafim or Enki drip irrigation. We have the fruit orchard, bed A, bed B, bed C. Each block is individually controlled by drip timers in these. So each system is programmed to automatically come on at any point in time in the day that we need to for X amount of time. So as far as maintenance, that's the human factor of the maintenance is cut out by about 95%. Then the only thing that we do is actually hand irrigate with fertiliser once or twice a week as it's needed. Strategy in this orchard is the plants are temporarily in pots until I can determine the growth habit that I want to get out of them, and then they may end up being permanently in the ground here. or keeping them growing until I can set up a fencing situation outside of this garden and start a bigger food forest orchard outside the fence. But another strategy I've had to overcome, or a problem I've had to overcome here, is the wildlife, wallabies, possums, and wombats, in that we've just finished implementing a permanent fence around the whole garden, which encompasses about 500 square meters, in that it's hot electric 24/7, and that at each gate the electric current breaks. So we're having a better success out of our food security in keeping the animals out. Smaller animals will come as they need to. There's lots of different companion plantings happening with them. We've got corn growing with a pear, we've got pumpkins growing with a peach, and we're trying to maximise our gardening space, and we put vegetables, herbs and flowers at the base of the fruit trees, which is going to bring a lot of biodiversity and insects. Here we have poppies, we have broad beans and peas, we have a curry plant or a pyrethrum, broad beans, nasturtium, peas, comfrey. Then we come down to the bottom of the garden, where we have our initial windbreak here. Again, just pallet timber on star pickets. We've just recently created this wooden bridge through here, whereas underneath here is a swale system that it's capturing all of the surplus water running through the garden into a point here where it's being held for longer. With our companion planting strategies, this entire bed is a very good example of lettuce, carrots, beans and onions all growing together. There's chives in there, there's celery in there. Again, everything is drip irrigated and timed for 15 minutes a day. Earlier on, a strategy to keep birds out of the garden was to create these net systems. So just using irrigation pipe and cutting half sleeves of the irrigation pipe helps to clamp the net onto there, and then also as a raise and lower effect we can just slide that up and down the pipe, but it allows the bumblebees and the other insects to get into there without creating too much problem. The next bed up we have companions of potatoes and broad beans. Early on we would sacrifice the broad beans to provide nitrogen to the potatoes, but we've let these broad beans grow to create a food source and mulch source, and at the moment there's a little bit of rust on them, but it doesn't seem to have too much of an effect with the growth of the potatoes, so I don't do too much. We don't spray any chemical pesticides or fungicides here. We just learn and observe and manage as it's required. More planter boxes, and again planter boxes made by volunteers. People that come here are encouraged to have a sense of creativity, and given the time and resources, then I allow people to create little long-lasting projects. At the end of the beds we have milk crate planter boxes with comfrey and cosmos and lemongrass, and they're replicated all the way, but a very simple recyclable system is a milk crate with carpet on the inside of it to stop the soil coming out, and these can be transported all the way around the garden, and in winter they can go back into the nursery and kept growing all year round. Rather than the comfrey going into hibernation, we can keep it growing all year round. In these beds we have carrots and again onions as their friend on the inside. So moving on from the carrots, we have some tomatoes growing here along with beans, and not that you can see them, but there'll be a tangled mess inside of that. And then kale, always trying to have a diversity of food to feed volunteers that come here. So we have kale, and then cabbage intermixed with that, and then spinach and silver beet and lettuce intermixed through here as well. All the beds are raised and timber framed. One of the early strategies that I used was timber framing with 4x2 posts in the ground, and over time I've found that the posts get wet and they start to spill wider than themselves, and the strategy I'm using now is using a longer star picket, about the half a length of a 165 picket, hammering those into the ground, retaining them with the timber, and then screwing with roofing screws into the timber, and found that to be very secure and much longer lasting. We're sort of growing more than what we need, so as if we get an infestation of insects, that they'll take their share and leave us with our share. Then we have eggplants in here, eggplants and beetroot and onions, wild potatoes coming up wherever they want to. And here's an interesting plant in that it's an eggplant and it has a tomato growing off the side of it for some reason. We haven't worried about changing it, but for some reason it's been grafted onto the side of an eggplant. There it is, and it seems to be doing okay. It doesn't seem to be affecting either one of them. So lots of onions, all the staples that we go through a lot, onions and carrots. We continually are sowing onions and carrots. We've got lettuce and broccoli and beetroot through here. Nasturtium is coming up wild. And again, anywhere where a potato comes up from a previous crop, we leave it until it starts interfering with something else. And then we have a glut of zucchini and corn, and one of the these are companions. Zucchini and corn are a companion. To complete the trio, we could be growing beans up the corn, and that would be called the Three Sisters, or known as the Three Sisters. But when the corn is initially planted, I grow radish as a companion crop and a ground cover for the corn, and by the time that the radishes are mature, the corn is big enough, we can harvest the radish and then heavily mulch the corn with wet chicken compost, and that'll provide the food for the corn to really bounce ahead. So that's all done. More zucchinis here, and yesterday this one was half the size, and they sort of double in size overnight. And then one person now can take the hose around the entire garden and using gravity flood irrigate the entire lot of the vegetables. So in the planter boxes we have a mix of diversity in herbs and flowers and insect repelling as well as insect attracting. We have the Ethiopian walking onion, we have mint, rosemary, pyrethrum. In the next one, some Mediterranean herbs, purple sage, normal sage, lavender, I think thyme or oregano here. We have tansy and comfrey. These are great composting herbs, and we have an area up the back that we're going to create into a compost herb garden, where these are going to be very close to the actual composting zone, so I can be chopping those and dropping them into the compost. Again, we have warrigal greens here, again another great composting herb, and a plant that just doesn't die. It's prolific through winter and summer. Replicating the tansy, and again this comes out with a beautiful yellow flower in a few months time. Lavender again, and cornflower. And then in here we have chives and rocket, carrots coming up with the chives, pak choi, lettuce and Japanese spinach. We've got broccoli and beetroot. Again, broccoli and beetroot are great companions. We've got spinach and beetroot, spinach, beetroot, broccoli all the way through there. And then tomatoes, basil, lettuce, cucumber, beans and yams, potatoes and tomatoes at the end here. About 12 different varieties of tomatoes in the other bed there. So we're at the top of the garden again, and just wanted to show or demonstrate the companion effect of the corn and the radish. So as I mentioned, I grow the radish up until it's mature, and then by the time it's mature and it's harvested, we heavily mulch with wet chicken compost. But with like this, it's suppressing most of the weeds. It's using every square inch of planting zone for something else, and even though they might be small at the moment, they're going to get bigger. And there's thousands of radishes in there of all different sizes, but grown very close quarters in helping suppress any weeds growing around the corn. And we can use that. We can eat the leaves, we can eat the fruit, we can eat everything off the radish plant. Just to wrap up, this is a strategy that we've found to be working more recently. One, in reducing the amount of man hours in weeding. This bed about a month ago was full of weeds and surplus crop from the previous season. So we folded it all into the middle, covered it with some chicken manure compost, and then covered it with this clear plastic in the hope that the heat is going to break down all the weeds and all the organic matter enough that the next step from here will be put carpet onto it, and then basically create a big worm farm and let the earthworms come in and eat everything that's there. And then by next season we're able to plant straight into that without any further additives. But we can see the heat that's got into there, the weeds are dying off. It's not creating a really wet zone, but it's hot enough that the plants can't live. Underneath the black plastic here, similar sort of thing. There's not much, it's breaking the stuff down. Nothing is actually growing unless it's actually getting light. But if we put that there, that will bake, and once we put some carpet on there again, worms will come up and eat everything and start getting it ready for us to plant into next season. So this is a recent addition to the farm in the hothouse or nursery. I built this entirely myself out of irrigation pipe, roofing battens and laser light, and some recycled doors. It took me about a week to build, and a fraction of the cost of what it would be worth to buy one off the net or have someone come and build it. So basically 2-inch irrigation pipe over star pickets. I level the embankment up with gravel. Across this mound here, water gets trapped coming down the road and goes underneath this bridge of plastic pallets and out to a drain that leads to a dam. And then here, this has been the heart and soul of getting the garden happening this season. We've propagated a lot of trees, a lot of fruit trees, a lot of acacias, a lot of the vegetable seedlings have come from here, flowers, herbs. We're also propagating and growing about 6 different varieties of bamboo at the moment. We have Bambusa Old Hamioi, which I intend to be one of the primary wind-breaking sources at the edges of the property where the wind's coming through the most. We have a few other shorter clumping varieties, different growth habit varieties like this one here. And from the nursery not long ago, I found Bambusa asper, which is a clumping bamboo, and this grows to a culm size by that and about 5 metre diameter, and can grow to about 20 metres tall. so it's unknown whether it's actually going to last outside, but I got them nearly dead from the nursery, so I'm going to try and keep those alive. The entire nursery is drip irrigated. It has ventilation at either side when it gets too hot in here, and in the future we may put some shade cloth over there. Our workbench in the middle and the sides are all made from recycled milk crates, and each milk crate has been cut out and carpet put in so it becomes a planting zone for strawberries as well. So it's basically a strawberry tower as well as a workbench for seedlings. So we're using those both sides. Just down here, one of the recent volunteers, Cynthia, has been experimenting with some poplar cuttings. So this is our plant source for the windbreaks in the southeast ridges. So it looks like they're doing okay at the moment. They're just in coarse sand and being irrigated daily. So hopefully those will come around by winter and we can plant those when it's wet in winter. Okay, so that's a bit of a tour of the garden. This season is working out to be quite prolific in the growth in the garden, and again all due to the help of volunteers. If you're interested to volunteer and come and learn strategies in permaculture design, you can visit the webpage, which is www.tigerhillpermaculture.net, or if you're a member of Workaway, go to workaway.info, or HelpX, which is helpx.net. Contact me, and I look forward to meeting you all.